Hey, Boris,
Yo.
you seen Ray?
No?
I haven't seen him in like a week. He said he was going down into the bunker there to finish some research. We thought we'd see him a couple days ago. He was supposed to record this a
Yeah.
couple days ago. He's just been down. I saw him come up for cornflakes and water a couple times.
I
He looked like
fear he
shit.
may have lost his mind.
Yeah, I think so too. He smells like he lost his mind. He's been down there a while working on this thing.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
wasn't
shit.
easy.
Oh,
He's
what?
back. He's here.
I read 2 books on George Lincoln Rockwell twice, and it was tough.
Yeah, I mean,
It was
I know
very
it's
depressing.
I know it's cold in here, but can you take off that swastika flag?
yeah,
been,
sorry
like,
about that.
You've
Yeah.
been, you've been huddled in it for a week now.
I mean, it's really kind of depressing, really hard to read at moments. I don't know.
Yeah, this is the first time. I think you're the first method podcaster.
Yeah.
You went all
Packing
in
his
here.
corncob pipe and
Yeah, he came up now and then to make announcements and protest something obscure, and then disappeared again. It's been a weird week in the compound.
Really, it was, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
that gives us a little hint of what we're talking about today.
Yeah. So this is The Empire Never Ended. I'm Fritz. We got Boris. We got Ray, who has emerged from his dark research cave on the American Nazi Party and George Lincoln Rockwell. And
Cockwell, as I like to
I
talk.
was trying not to say it. I'm trying to give the illusion that we're like classy researchers, like a professional podcast.
Yes.
We can't just name everybody Dick Butt and Cockwell and like
Or Sackwell. No.
Suckswell, yeah. That's
plebeian.
Plebeian
We're a bunch
japes.
of plebeians.
We can't do that, no.
All right. So Ray, how you feeling?
I'm feeling okay, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll see now how it will go. This will be we already covered American Nazi Party a little bit. Fritz talked about Burros, their member who was Jewish and very weird. And in the first arc, we also talked a lot about James Mason, who was the member of the American Nazi Party. So in this episode, in our next 3 episodes, I will cover the American Nazi Party during the time of when it was led by George Lincoln Rockwell. Who wants to know more about how it was after he died? You can listen to the James Mason episode. There's a lot because he joined after Rockwell's death.
Yeah. Spoiler: it was completely unproblematic and went great for everybody.
Yeah, it's just
Generally enriching experience all around.
yeah. Maybe at some point we'll talk more about the party after he's dead, but I think for now this is enough. I mean, we will have probably next week an episode that we'll talk more about Koehl, who was the leader after Rockwell, but we won't talk so much about the American Nazi Party. We'll talk about what Koehl did after that with his weird esoteric Hitlerist stuff.
Yeah.
By the way, that guy's name, he's Matt Koehl or Matthias Koehl. His name is spelled Koehl. I pronounce it Koehl because that's how James Mason pronounces it, and I guess he knew him personally, so I guess he knows, but I don't know, maybe.
When my mom took me shopping for pants back in the day, we pronounced it Coles.
I don't know. Mason says Koehl, so I guess he will.
Well, when all else fails, trust James Mason.
I mean, he basically lived with him in the compound, so I guess.
Yeah, William Luther Pierce also specifies that it's pronounced Koehl. Yeah.
Oh, he does, huh?
It's a general consensus.
Okay. Well, good that such great people have a consensus on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great and trustworthy.
I gotta say, next to the Bunds, I think that Rockwell and the AMP kind of, out of all the people we've talked about, factor heavily into like pop culture and fiction as well. No?
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking of like Man in the High Castle, where Rockwell's what, the president of the U.S. or something?
Yeah, that's in the show, right? I didn't watch that. In the book, he doesn't appear at all.
No, and he appears in the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it.
Well, he was like a spectacular figure. I mean, that's his whole point was. So I'm not surprised that he is present in the popular culture.
Yeah.
So this first, sorry, I said first. Delete that.
Your brain's all fucked up.
Yeah. So this first episode on the ANP will have 3 parts. I actually have parts now. So the first one will be on the early life of Rockwell. The second part will be Rockwell becoming a Nazi, and the third part will be about some street actions and agitation by the American Nazi Party.
So it's got a funny ending.
Yes, and then next week we'll talk about everything that happened until Rockwell got killed.
Also a funny ending.
Yeah. So let's start from the first part.
Do you have a subtitle for it?
No, just the early life of George Lincoln Rockwell.
The demon son of vaudeville.
Yeah.
Yes, that'll hold 'em.
So Rockwell was born in 1918 in Bloomington, Illinois. He was the first child. Later, he had 2 more siblings. So his parents were George Lovejoy Rockwell, better known as Doc Rockwell, and Claire Shade. So Doc was a popular vaudeville comic in the 1920s, and he headlined such venues as the Palace Theater and Radio City Music Hall in New York and so on, and was actually one of the best paid vaudevillians of his time. So he was kind of a big deal. Claire also came out of a show business family. She was a toe dancer since she was a child.
A toe dancer?
Yeah.
Is that just what it sounds like? It's just a clever...
I don't know.
It's like tap dancing without the tap shoes? Or?
I thought
so
you
nobody
would know
can hear
what
it. It's silent tap dancing. You thought I would know what a 1919 vaudevillian style dance would be?
It was like enough of a thing that she left school to dedicate her life to
toe dancing
when she was like 9. And she was a part.
Kids.
Yeah, she was a part of a family act called the Four Shades.
They all toe danced together.
Yeah. So they got married in 1915. I think Claire was 22 or 23 at the time. Doc was older. His nickname Doc has something to do with one of his acts when he mocked, I think, like chiropractors or something like that.
Good. Good for him.
That was his act, the most popular act that he had. So when she married, Claire gave up theater and became a full-time wife and mother, because that's what Doc wanted. And Doc was a very dominant person in his life, and especially in his marriage. And Claire was kind of the submissive person who was really dominated first by her father, who made her leave school and get a job when she was 9 to work for him. Damn. And now she switched that role for her husband and basically did whatever he wanted her to do. So Doc was a guy who was, I think it's safe to say, like extremely annoying. The people say who knew him that he was always on, as they would say. So he was performing. I
get that a lot too.
All the time.
Yeah.
So he walked fast, talked fast. He spoke very loudly. He was telling jokes, performing magic tricks all the time. Played various instruments. So as he saw it, the purpose of everyone around him was to be his audience, and mostly that's how he interacted with the world, including his children.
Hey kids, it's Doc Rock here.
Yes, so completely psychotic. Yeah. And you can see a lot of that in Rockwell, like especially in his photographs. I mean, when he was a kid as well. He kind of looks like a psychotic performer. I mean, both son and father. So he always demanded to be at the center of the stage. But it's interesting to note that at the time he was, of course, friends with all the top show business people of his time. So like Fred Allen was his best friend, Benny Goodman was a friend, Jack Benny, and Groucho Marx, for example. All of these people, when Rockwell, the Nazi, the baby, was christened, all of these people attended. Like so, Groucho Marx was at George Lincoln Rockwell's christening party.
Weird.
Damn.
Yeah, so I mean, the parents, Doc and Claire, they met at this theater that Claire's father managed, called the Majestic Theater in Bloomington. And as I said, she was a very passive and submissive person. And they settled in Bloomington near her family when they got married. And the marriage was never good. Doc drank a lot and was an asshole. And actually, they surprisingly to me, they divorced pretty quickly. I imagine they divorced because that's what Doc wanted. So they divorced in 1924 when Rockwell was 6 years old, and this was like an extremely traumatic event for him and was traumatized by it his whole life. I say that it's probably the what Doc wanted and not Claire, because she also during the divorce process was completely doing everything that he wanted. So he structured the whole divorce to his convenience. He paid alimony only sporadically and child support, although he was full of money, and Claire and her 3 kids were quite poor and always in debt, not able to pay bills and so on.
Man, Doc Rock sounds like an abusive asshole.
Yeah.
So Doc moved to the coast of Maine, and he had like the best time of his life, while his kids and former wife basically lived in poverty. But he did spend some time with his kids, his 3 kids now. They would go and spend the summers with their father. And Rockwell really adored and idolized his father. And for him, at least that's how he writes about it. Even later, when he wasn't in good, he didn't have a good relationship with his father, he just adored that the time that he spent there with his father. And he saw it as a kind of adventurous and stimulating time, always. So his dad would, tell all kinds of stories and discuss various topics, and he took them like to, like stuff like sailing and deep sea fishing and such things, and it was like a very adventurous time for young Rockwell, and he loved it. But on the other hand, Doc was always extremely emotionally distant to his children, and especially to Rockwell. And he essentially wasn't interested in them at all. He saw them as, his audience as much as in the way he saw the rest of the world, and not really in a different way. So there was no like guidance or love or any kind of real care from Doc towards Rockwell. And so one cousin would later said that he doesn't recall any instance of affection expressed by Doc towards young Rockwell. But things became worse soon, because Doc was a very short person, and Rockwell, as he grew, became a very tall person. And Doc was very insecure about his height. So
I feel like you're describing like Jane Goodall's chimps right now. Like this is the kind of stuff that went on with them.
Yeah. So what Doc decided to do now is just to, terrorize his son and make him miserable by using his sarcastic humor all the time, and making Rockwell, the butt of all of his sarcastic jokes, and just make him miserable, which he constantly did. And so the people in the family say that Doc was like pathologically, competitive with his son. But the whole time, Rockwell was desperate to win any kind of affection from his father or any kind of approval. And in this process, he started emulating his father and basically became a copy of him. So he started speaking in the same manner, very loudly and rapidly, and everyone says he also was always on in the same way. So yeah, this sounds already really horrible, and no one is even a Nazi now. Yes. And one close relative even says that Rockwell became a con man and an opportunist, just like his father. So even people in his family early on, both of them, they saw them as opportunists and con men. Rockwell also became a kind of an obnoxious, constant prankster, and that's how people remember him. So the book that I mainly used for this episode is called The American Führer. It was written by Frederick J. Simonelli. And I also used another book called For Race and Nation by William H. Schmaltz, but I found the first one by Simonelli much more concise, so I mostly used that one for this episode. And Simonelli says that...
It was so concise, you read it twice.
Yes. Well, that's my problem. Yeah. I'm not a good reader, I think. First time I just read, I don't take notes, so that's a problem. So Simonelli says that in this period, Rockwell lived in like emotional wasteland.
Yeah, okay.
Where his father didn't care about him at all or show any interest in him. So every fall, Rockwell and his siblings would go back to their mother, and this was just a horrible time for them. They didn't want to go back, especially because at some point, Claire started living with her sister, Arlene. Now, Arlene was another dominating and abusive figure in her life. She initially helped her because she took over her finances, helped her in that way, which was good. And she hated Doc, which was good, and really fought against him in the courts for alimony payments and such things. But she hated Doc very much, and then she saw Doc in Rockwell. So she started hating Rockwell even when he was a young kid, and started abusing him psychologically and physically. So she started beating him like when she was a small child.
Damn.
And didn't stop until like he left for college, basically.
Damn.
And she would also like torment him daily with like abusive arguments about how his father is an evil, horrible person, and then he would like in the evening he would like kind of nod off, go to sleep, and then she would wake him up just to continue yelling at him.
Shit.
So yeah, it was he was very angry at Arlene and remained until the rest of his life just filled with rage, and had he loved his mother very much, and she was the only person in his family that continued to speak to him later, like no one else did, and to support him. But he really had a hard time forgiving her that she allowed this abuse to happen. But he kind of did forgive her, so he did have like support from her his whole life, in a probably not a very like good way. Like she financed the Nazi Party, for example.
Right.
Nazi only a mother could love.
Yeah.
It's interesting that his mom's name was Shade, and Dan Burros' mom's name was Sunshine. So you had in the A&P Sunshine and Shade.
But they're kind of unusual names for
They could have their own show.
people.
I mean, this is like Shade. This is a German name, so I think in German it's Schade or something like that.
Schade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's SCHADE. I think something like that. Yeah. So young Rockwell was spending time in 3 households. One was his mother's, then his father's, and he would also go to his aunt, like his father's sister and her husband. This was the Smith household. When he wanted to, escape the abusive aunt Arlene, he would go there. And all of these 3 households were, as Simonelli puts it, they had the usual level of racism and anti-Semitism for the time, which I guess means really a lot of that.
Yeah.
And for example, in the Smith family, the father of the house would often come, from work and start just raging against, black people and Jews, using all the racial slurs. And this was like a kind of a casual anti-Semitism and racism of the time. It's how people perceived it. Nothing strange about it,
Right.
They were not like wearing brown shirts and marching with swastikas or something like that.
Just yelling the N-word at their family at dinner. Yeah.
Yes. And
Good old-fashioned Americans.
His father, had many Jewish friends, but still would say, very anti-Semitic things at times, and such things. And I think that Rockwell always thought that this was very hypocritical, and he criticized his father for being like that, who basically agreeing with him, but being friends with Jews and, a part of the polite society, as all of these people were, in a way. Which is interesting. I'll come back to that later.
I mean, the Marx Brothers were Jewish, no? I mean, that's...
Yeah. So Rockwell was a very, very angry young man. And when he went to school, he started participating in organizing this kind of quasi-political protests about various things, and usually they were like ego-driven and just only disguised, I think, as some kind of like they were about some higher goal. Some of them were like, okay, he organized like a school boycott of the cafeteria because of the bad food there.
We did that at my school, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but he was the person who organized it. He also like kind of did a strike against the teacher who had like this very repetitive way of like a lazy way of teaching kids, just making them like transcribe a bunch of text. So Rockwell would go to school and he would just like put his feet on the table and read a magazine. And when people would ask him what's going on, he said that he was on strike. And at first the teacher like laughed at him, and then other kids started doing it, and it became a problem. So, the school got involved, and they said, you need to stop this or you won't be able to graduate. And he didn't stop. So he had to leave school and enter a different school in order to graduate.
Don't you forget about me.
So this was kind of good for him because at that time when he went to other school, he also he moved out and started living with his paternal grandmother and his father's sister, Margie. So Aunt Margie was actually the only person in his life who really showed him like affection and love and was interested in him and talked to him about his problems and so on. And this had a good effect on him. And his grades got better. He edited a school paper. He had a first kiss when he was 17 or 18 in this period. And so things like that. It seemed like, okay, maybe this guy will,
make it through.
Not become a Nazi.
Right. Yeah.
So
least. The bar is so low. It's really sad. At least he won't become a Nazi now.
Yeah. He graduated in 1936. And he wanted to go to college. So his father got involved at this point, probably not because he actually cared about his son, because, of snobby reasons. He wanted his son to go to a good school. He actually wanted him to go to Harvard, specifically.
Of course he did.
So Rockwell didn't have such good grades. So what his father decided to do is to make him go to a second high school for the final class and repeat it and graduate, get a second high school degree in a better school, which he did. He lived with his aunt and grandmother at the time in Providence, so he enrolled in some good school in Providence. And he actually got his second high school degree and then applied to Harvard and didn't get it. And they were so sure that he will that he didn't apply to any other college.
This is like Hitler's art school moment, isn't it?
Yeah. And so his father wouldn't allow him just to not do anything for a year. So he enrolled him into some boarding prep school in Maine.
So a third high school?
Yes, now a third high school. Which was like a boarding school. And Rockwell says that he liked it there, that he was surprised by actually liking that school. He started reading there serious books for the first time. He read Sinclair Lewis, Steinbeck, and so on. But he also had started doing his usual things, he organized some night marches against the chemistry instructor, because, I don't know, he didn't like him. So they would
or something. Or
I don't know why exactly. So they would do these marches in the night, that would go through where the teacher actually lived, in front of his residence, and they actually made the teacher resign. So he left the school.
Damn.
So he was kind of impressed by himself, and he found that he could do things like that. That he could move people with his words.
Was he also 3 years older than everybody else in his class at this
Probably,
point?
yes. Yeah. And he also became a bully, and he later bragged how he would make life miserable. These are his words. To boys who were slower or naive, or he just didn't like them because they were different in some way. He kind of bragged and found pleasure that he was tormenting them.
Right, because he was 3 years older than
Yes.
Yeah.
3 years older than the oldest of them,
Yes. he was never admitted to Harvard, but he actually was admitted to another Ivy League school, to Brown University. I think this was like in 38 or 39, around there somewhere. I'm not sure exactly. So he became a student at Brown. He was not a complete loser like there. Like he had an ambivalent relation to this university. For example, he restarted the campus humor magazine called Sir Brown. It was dormant for some period, and he became the art director of it because he was a cartoonist. Since he was a kid until he died, basically he did draw cartoons. And,
that's interesting because later he'd have a lot of like people who did drawings, cartoons, people who knew printing around him.
Yes.
Okay.
So he majored in philosophy, but he developed this, of course, every fascist, he developed this kind of a pessimistic view of human nature and society in general. And in this period, he became interested in conspiracy theories and started reading really conservative political books. He said that at this time, he later said that he saw the college community as infected by communism.
Okay.
He was really kind of, he hated sociology and was kind of really uneasy about it and almost provoked by the existence of such a thing as sociology. He really hated that, sociologists try to explain inequality or differences between people and classes and so on with some kind of social reasons and environment and such things. He thought this is like completely ridiculous. And, so he wrote, like mocking that at school, he wrote some kind of a sarcastic essay about ants, how, social scientists were like studying ants, and then they discovered they are ants because they are socialized by other ants in ant environment or something like that. So basically,
that was his humor magazine, huh?
No, I think he actually did this in school, like to make fun of teachers, something like that. He thought that he was smart. So basically, you already see here his racism. He probably compares like black people with ants, and he thinks that it's ridiculous. The sociologists explain, that the level of poverty in the black community has anything to do with anything else than them just being inferior, basically.
Yes.
And he really has like very like strong emotions about this. Now at the university he met again a young woman that he met the previous summer called Judith Altman, who was also a student at the university. He liked her very much. She was like a smart person, kind of ambitious, coming from a relatively rich family, and he fell in love with her and wanted to marry her, but she wasn't sure and kind of said no to him a few times. And
she sounds sure.
Yeah. And I mean, she kind of liked him, I guess, but she said no. And then he was bored with college and frustrated that Judy doesn't want to marry him. So in 1941, he joined the U.S. Navy. And he was not a fan of FDR, but at this time he believed, the Axis forces were a menace that need to be dealt with. And he was bored and frustrated. And
sure.
That's why he joined.
So you don't know if he took any position in the 30s on the war? Like, was he interested in the American
I didn't
First
see anything about that. Okay. No. Probably not interested at all. Before being shipped off as a Navy pilot, he returned to Brown to see Judy and just try one more time to ask her if she will marry him.
In uniform?
Yes, in
He's
uniform.
Going for it.
And she said yes.
Hey, it worked.
And he was completely ecstatic and went, into World War II really, really happy. And during the war, he saw service primarily in support roles, like photo reconnaissance, transport and training functions aboard I think 4 different ships. In 1944, he was promoted to a lieutenant, and he performed a support function during the invasion of Guam. He never actually flew in combat at all, but he later lied that he did. But there's no record of that in the Navy. In October 41, he was promoted to lieutenant commander. And to be honest about this, military did kind of see him as a competent pilot and was rather satisfied with him as an officer. During the war, he went back home in 1943 to marry Judith. They had a small wedding and a short honeymoon, and his father didn't attend. Like, not because like he didn't like was angry at him, but for some unexplained reason didn't care about his son. You know, who was like in a war now, getting married and so on. He just didn't had something better to do.
Great.
Judith's family really didn't like Rockwell. And the marriage didn't go well, like starting from the honeymoon. Like they started fighting immediately and having arguments. And so it was a catastrophe from day one. Rockwell, on the other hand, was angry at Judith's family because they didn't like train her well to be a submissive wife. Like she had like ambitions. She like didn't understand why she supposed to wash dishes all the time and such things. You know, she was like a university like educated person who had other ideas, and Rockwell was completely shocked at this, you know, such behavior, and thought that her family really made some big mistakes there.
Yeah, her family did. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time that he was discharged from the Navy, their marriage was already in deep shit. They moved back to Maine to be close to his father for some reason. He still idolized
who didn't
him,
even show up at their wedding.
And he tried to make a living like by being a sign painter, and he opened like a store called the Maine Photo Art Service, and this was on his like on a piece of land that was owned by his father, so he didn't have to pay rent.
Sorry, where is this?
In Maine somewhere.
Maine, okay.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where. The business was not going well. It was like surviving basically only because he didn't have to pay rent, and Judith was pregnant at the time. In 1946, they moved to New York City, and now he enrolled in a Pratt Institution for Commercial Art in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
So he started studying commercial illustration. He wanted to be an illustrator. They were really broke, so they moved again with the Smith family with his Aunt Helen and her anti-Semitic husband Roscoe Smith. This is when they got the first child, Bonnie. And at some point, like GI housing was available, so they moved and lived there. And a good thing happened to him in 1948. He won like a prestigious illustration competition in New York City for like a poster he did for American Cancer Society. So this was like a big thing, and he would probably get good jobs after that in New York City. But he completely like without any explanation that's reasonable, he decided to leave school at that moment and move back to Maine. So I think there's like, you can see there is a lot of like probably fear of any kind of success here. Like he self-sabotages a lot in his life. Right. And this is like really also connected to him becoming a Nazi, especially in the way that he did, and as we'll see soon. So he moved back to Maine, and then he opened an advertising agency there with two partners. But soon he fell out with the partners, and they bought him out. And this will happen like his whole life. He will start something with some people, then start arguing with them, and then it all goes to shit.
Right.
He started publishing like I think with this agency some magazines. It was like his field. So one of them was kind of like an Old Maine Guide, which was a free tourist magazine, and he also started like publishing a magazine which was called What's Next, which basically had the same concept and format as TV Guide, but before TV Guide. So Rockwell basically invented
TV Guide.
Yes. In 1950, the Korean War was going on, so the Navy called him and resumed his active duty. And so he left for assignment as an instructor at the Naval Air Support School in California, in San Diego. But the marriage was so bad at this point that Judith decided not to go with him. So she took their two daughters at the time and left with them to live with her mother in Connecticut. He moved to San Diego, and he missed his family very much. It has to be said that it seems that he throughout his life had some kind of genuine affection for his children. Like he really missed them. Seems that he loved them, but he was never able to take care of them. Like once they were gone, he really didn't do anything to make their life better. But he did like it seems, honestly, kind of missed them very much when they were gone.
Well, I guess since he had 2 daughters, he was probably sad he had to do the dishes himself when they weren't
Yeah.
around.
I think he didn't do this. As we'll see later. Like that was like
He took a principled stand.
Fucking slob.
yeah. So he was trying to convince Judith all the time to give him a second chance, and she would often do that. So she moved to San Diego with him, but they started fighting immediately when she did. And this would repeat, this kind of thing all the time. And in the middle of this fighting and breaking up and, restarting again, the third daughter was born. So I guess they were just, the horrible marriage didn't prevent them from making more and more children. In 1950,
I mean, at least we think it's his.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Ooh.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Phil over here.
Yeah.
So in 1952, Judith got a break, and the Navy decided to send Rockwell to Iceland. And that was basically that for their marriage. They never lived again after that. And on that occasion, the Navy also promoted him to full commander. And this is where Commander Rockwell comes from.
All right.
He got promoted to commander for going to live on Iceland. And
Well, yes, the frozen wastes.
yeah.
Fucking, yeah, fairies can kill you out there.
Yeah.
Ask permission to sit on rocks. I get it. It's tough.
So, but as his family life was falling apart and this marriage was really horrible and he was really depressed, something happened to him in his last year in San Diego. And this is what happened to him, as he said, was that he became aware of the truth of Adolf Hitler. And of the Jewish communist conspiracy that's trying to rule the world, and specifically America. Yeah. So when he landed on Iceland, he was already a Nazi. And this is basically something that happened to him just in the last year. So it completely coincided with the complete failure of his family life, which he was kind of desperate to save, but was not able to do. That's when he became a Nazi. And so the truth of Adolf Hitler. Yeah. And we'll see that repeat itself a few times. So this is the act 1 of the episode.
Okay. All right. Man, it's already fucking sad as shit.
It will continue to be sad.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like it could be like a comedy, like a very, very black comedy. This whole history of the American Nazi Party.
I mean, Rockwell would insist on playing himself, though.
Yeah. Okay. Act 2.
Okay.
All right.
So this is Rockwell's early Nazi period and the founding of the American Nazi Party. So just before he left for Iceland, he decided to visit his cousin Peter Smith in Norfolk, Virginia. This was in the late 1952. And during the visit, he got super drunk, as his cousin did. And during the visit, he started getting more and more agitated, talking about the Jewish conspiracy to control the United States. And his cousin was kind of surprised. He was not surprised that he was saying anti-Semitic things, because he himself...
Yeah, his dad's the anti-Semite, right?
Yes, he's the son of the anti-Semite, I think.
Yeah.
The cousin, he came from an anti-Semitic home. But he was surprised that, Rockwell was so agitated, and that in the end he said that there is a necessity to start an American Nazi Party, and that America fought on the wrong side of the World War II. This was like a bit too much for him, and he was surprised that this guy is taking this so much seriously and is angry about it.
What are these people's lines in their mind?
Yeah. And but he wasn't. It's interesting that he wasn't sure if Rockwell was serious, like, the whole time, because he saw him as a con man, like his father was. So the whole time he was thinking, like, is he like cooking up some new scheme? And I mean, that's also probably true.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
the whole thing looks like that.
It really does. Yeah.
Yeah. So they both got super drunk, and he also visited the cousin's sister, his cousin Nancy Smith, who he wanted to seduce, while being super
cousin
drunk.
Fucking.
He wanted to.
That's a new one on the show.
Have sex with him while being super drunk, and she kind of had to say no, like, a lot of times, and then he gave up in the end and left, and she never saw him again.
That sounds good.
Pretty pathetic, yes. So in Iceland, he spent 2 years. 2 services like he did there. And he says that he buried himself in reading and studying. What this actually means is that he read Mein Kampf 12 times.
Okay.
You mean he read all the greats of Nazi literature?
Yes. And as he said, he came to the realization in Iceland that National Socialism is the iconoclastic worldview of Adolf Hitler and was the doctrine of scientific racial idealism and a new religion of our times. So Nazism is a scientific racial idealism and a new religion.
And the new religion. It's
Yes.
got it all.
Okay.
Yes, it's everything.
It's things that shouldn't even make sense together.
Yes.
It's got it.
So while he was there, he divorced from his wife. He continued reading this anti-Semitic stuff. He devoured anti-Semitic writings of Gerald L.K. Smith that
Okay.
we mentioned before.
Yeah.
We
he's
don't
been
have an
around
episode
in-
about
No,
him.
he's been in a few episodes though. He's been in
Maybe in the future we should do an episode about him.
Christian
mentioned-
Identity has got a big old chunk on him in that
yes.
episode, yeah. And America First, I think, too.
So Rockwell also read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion for the first time in Iceland. At some point, he was invited to a diplomatic reception in Reykjavik. This was in the home of the first secretary of the Norwegian embassy. And there, while in this reception, he fell in love. He in love with a young woman called Tora Hallgrímsson, who
All right,
was
well done.
23 years old. And she was like a tall blonde. He thought that she had like aristocratic bearing, and she was born in a wealthy family of privilege. She was very educated. She was already divorced, had one child, I think.
Okay.
She traveled the world, spoke perfect English.
Wasn't her dad like the ambassador or some shit?
Yeah, she came from a family of business people, diplomats, and even like archbishops in Iceland.
Oh, all right.
And so by 1953, they were dating already. And October of that year, they got married in the National Cathedral of Reykjavik. And she was already pregnant, 2 months pregnant at the time. So they honeymooned in Bavarian Alps. And they visited.
I wonder why.
Yeah, they visited the site of the Hitler's mountain retreat there. So it is not clear if she was if Tora was a Nazi, but he claimed that he confided his beliefs to her and his ambitions, political as well, and then she pledged to follow him regardless of the consequences. Is what he says. By the way, she died last year.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Damn.
and she remarried later to some wealthy guy, and so and moved there with her and Rockwell's kids. So like Rockwell's descendants are actually some like lived in Iceland, and yeah, I think one of his grandkids is some like soccer player or something.
Okay.
Oh, on the heroic Icelandic side that overcame all odds to enter
Right.
the last World Cup, I think it
Right.
was, right? Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Those are like all like amateur players and shit.
So in May 54, their first son was born, Lincoln Hallgrímur. And
Killing these names.
So in 54, his tour in Iceland ended. And by the way, Thor's family also didn't like him. No one liked him. So in 54, he returned to the States with his new family, plus a stepson that Thor had. So they had a son and a stepson, and they moved back to Maine. So in Maine, he tried being an inventor. So he was inventing some toys, also something that sounds like a TV remote control that also had some advertisement on it. I don't understand exactly what it was.
Word.
He also started he tried being a freelance writer or something like that. But his biggest success of the time was
marrying a rich woman.
That's as well. But he started a free publication which was called U.S. Lady, and this the idea was to distribute this to the wives of U.S. servicemen, and basically to make it an attractive magazine for advertisers. And the first issue was published in 1955. And it seemed that it would be successful, but he again had a falling out with his partners, so everything went to shit, and he lost the control over the magazine. In this period, he met William F. Buckley. He went to visit him, and he tried to, he talked anti-Semitic stuff to Buckley, but Buckley apparently didn't want to talk about that. But he gave him a job, and so Rockwell became a promoter. He promoted subscriptions for Buckley's magazine National Review on college campuses. And this, I think, lasted for 6 months or something like that, the job he did for Buckley. He started a one-man public relations and advertisement agency that wasn't successful. A second child was born, Jeannie, and so this...
Damn, he has, 5 kids now?
Plus a stepson, yeah. So they're these crazy Nazis now, at this time, responsible for 6 children. And 2 wives, basically, yeah. And so... he tried to use Thora's family connections to start a 7-Up bottling franchise in Iceland. Somehow, 7-Up will repeat, it will appear again in this episode for some reason.
Really?
Did not expect that. Okay.
Not at all.
I don't know what's the connection with 7-Up with Nazi stuff, but it's interesting.
7-fold path? Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
The 7-Ups. Next scene.
We should research 7-Up. Yeah,
yeah, totally.
So they moved to Washington, D.C., and he started moving in conservative circles and more and more fringe conservative circles there. And he became a big supporter of Senator Joe McCarthy.
Of course.
So he's a Nazi at this point, but he's not an open Nazi. He started writing for a right-wing publication, which was called American Mercury, and tried to connect different conservative groups. And at some point, he started something which was called the American Federation of Conservative Organizations, which was basically him. But he wanted to really become a leader of conservative groups as a closeted Nazi. But he, at the same time, thought that all American Nazi groups are complete shit and too tame and timid. And but he believed that secretly all of them shared his anti-Semitic views, and so, but were too hypocritical to speak publicly about that. Which, I mean, he wasn't wrong.
No, I think this is also the generation that really lost control before World War II.
Yeah,
you know, they learned some, I guess, tactical lessons.
Yes, and I mean, and also it's interesting that there is a parallel in how he saw the American right and how he saw his family. He thought that both groups are kind of hypocrites, that they all agree with him, but no one will say it. Right. And I think a lot of what he did later, maybe subconsciously, was in a way his attempt to embarrass both groups, in a way, to become an embarrassment for everyone, which he did. He managed to do, yeah. Okay. So he even had a critique of the John Birch Society, for example, and he explicitly said they talk about the communist conspiracy. They clearly mean the Jewish conspiracy, but are too afraid to say that. So he called Robert Welch Rabbit Welch all the time.
That's barely an insult.
Yeah, but I mean, this is like my tiny pod thing. They're not exactly good at these insults. If they can't. If they don't just say racial slurs, they're not very creative.
That's true.
With their other kinds of insults.
True. All his humor is just crude racist stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So 1958 was a big year for him because this is the year when he became an open Nazi. Not because he wanted exactly. He was kind of outed as a Nazi, as we will see. And he basically cut his ties with conservative groups, at least in an open way. Maybe he had still some ties that were not so open. This year was important because he met 2 people who were very important in his career as a Nazi agitator. And both of them were rich, apparently. So the first one was this weird guy, which was called D. West Hooker.
Sorry.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And so DJ Best Hooker.
Yes. So this guy is very weird and interesting because D. West Hooker was a New York guy and apparently a rich guy coming from a prominent family, well connected. He was like a graduate of Cornell University. He was like a sophisticated, athletic guy. He was 40 years old, exactly like Rockwell, wealthy guy. But he was a Nazi, like an open Nazi, like admirer of Hitler and total anti-Semite. And he already started a Nazi group in New York. So he had a Nazi group before Rockwell did. It was called the National Youth League. And a lot of people who would become first Rockwell stormtroopers came from this group, including Matt Koehl and also, I think, John Patsalos, later called John Petler. We will talk more about Petler in the next episode. He's important for Rockwell's life and death. The way that D. West Hooker influenced Rockwell was that he suggested to him and convinced him that the only way to mobilize the American population in an effective way is to become an open Nazi and to agitate the Jews.
It's a bold theory.
Yes. And really, he was convinced by that.
That Americans are going to love outright Nazis.
Yes. And so after meeting him, Rockwell said that his life changed permanently. And he inspired him to come out as a Nazi. Although he didn't do that, as we'll see. I mean, he didn't voluntarily came out as a Nazi. He was getting convinced that, by stepping out and openly being a Nazi and challenging the Jewish cabal, as he called it, he would give voice to a large, silent, and leaderless masses who were just waiting for a leader because no one in the right wing was able to lead them because they were also scared and cowardly. This is the theory. So this guy, D. West Hooker, is interesting because he comes from this. We will need to talk about these people more. This is the New York Nazis. Like a few of them were rich and well connected, and kind of remained in the shadows and influenced a lot of groups, but they are not so well known. One
You're
of
talking
them
about
is
Madol and these guys?
connected to him, but even less known. Like, for example, this guy H. Kit Thompson. We'll talk more about him. He was the friend of Yoki, also a rich kind of guy, well connected. Claimed to have been a member of the SS during the war, like as an American guy. Probably like Nazi intelligence, but like a New Yorker,
Yeah, I was going to say he must have lived in Yorksville or something.
Yeah, I think he died in like 2000s or something. But an interesting thing about this guy Hooker is that he, soon after inspiring Rockwell to become an open Nazi, he left to live in Italy, and he lived there since until the 80s.
Oh, damn.
Why did he go there? To open a 7-Up franchise.
Oh, shit.
What is happening?
I don't know.
I understand now why you have been in the basement for so long. You've been making like those fucking sticky notes on the walls with red thread connecting
7-Up question mark?
Yes.
Yes.
What's the connection? So wait, Rockwell wanted to open a 7-Up franchise before he met D. West Hooker, who did open up a 7-Up franchise.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's fucking crazy.
The first idea of the 7-Up franchise was somehow connected to Thora's wealthy family in Iceland, somehow. And this time it's Italy. I don't know, like a wealthy Nazi going to Italy in the 50s, staying there until the 80s. Italy, GLADIO.
Yeah.
7-Up now.
Yeah.
So we're
The
confirming
7-Up was
now.
a front for GLADIO.
Yes.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, I don't know if
7-Up is
anybody's
a
made that
stay
connection
behind
yet.
unit.
Yes.
So the other important guy that Rockwell met in 58 was this psycho called Harold Noel Aerosmith.
That name's Aerosmith? Like the
What is
band?
wrong with the names on this episode?
Aerosmith, yeah. Arrow, like, So he was from a prosperous Baltimore family, but he made a fortune in business. Like, it is said that he had like hundreds of millions of dollars in 1950s. So would make by today's standards, he would be like
a billionaire. Or
a billionaire, yeah. And so he didn't have to had a lot of time, so he dedicated his time to being a Nazi. And he was what they call an amateur anthropologist, which I imagine he was into skull stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think amateur anthropologist just means racist.
Yes.
Yes.
He was into eugenics, anti-Semitism, racism.
There you go.
And in 1950, he founded the National Committee to Free America from Jewish Dominance.
Hey.
Oh.
He was introduced to Rockwell through a guy who was the editor of a segregationist paper, which was called the Virginian. And they liked each other, and Rockwell was just what he needed. He wanted to fund some idiot to do Nazi stuff. And so he really made a partnership with Rockwell, so the Rockwell should kind of restart this committee to free America because it was dormant for years. And Rockwell says that Aerosmith believed that the Jews were subhuman and that he was an exterminationist. That it was his position on the Jewish question.
All right.
Clear.
So he gave him a bunch of money. I think it was like around $20,000, and he set him up, Rockwell, in a small house with a printing press. So he started basically publishing Nazi stuff, but still not as an open Nazi, like barely, like not calling himself Nazi, but
He still wasn't flying the flag.
No.
Yeah.
Is this a house in Arlington? Or
still not, I think.
Okay.
No, still not. But after 5 months, they had a falling out, and Aerosmith stopped financing him and basically evicted him from the house. One of the reasons that he did that was that secretly Rockwell used the money to start an openly Nazi organization, which I think Aerosmith didn't support, or at least didn't sanction. And this phantom group was called the World Union of Free Enterprise National Socialists.
yes,
yeah,
the
yeah.
dumbest,
What's its
most
name?
meaningless
Yeah.
name ever invented
Yes.
for
Yeah.
a Nazi party.
So this was basically only Rockwell. The Woofens was also only Rockwell, really. And it contributed to the end of the Aerosmith-Rockwell partnership. But Aerosmith was significant because he made Rockwell into like a professional Nazi hate monger, which he will remain until the end of his life. During this time, in 1958, Rockwell also forged connections with some extremely racist people in Georgia and played a role in them starting the National States Rights Party.
Oh, okay.
So he was involved there from the start. Almost, you could say, basically he was one of the co-founders of the party, although he had like a more shadow role there, supplying them with material and advising them and such things. In this time, during this period, he made connections with Emory Burke, who was a pre-war American fascist, an admirer of Hitler, who after the war started the Colombians, which were the first post-Second World War Nazi organization in America. Yeah.
What are they? The Colombians?
Yes. It's some kind of Colombian order of something. I don't know. They call them Colombians. So they were. So these are also the group that we are not directly covering in this arc, but maybe in some future actually we should. Both the National States Rights Party that Koehl was also a member of at some time, some period, and also the Colombian. But exactly at this period, he was outed by the media as a Nazi. What happened was that a bomb exploded on October 12th of 1958 in the oldest synagogue in Atlanta. And the press reported that Rockwell had a connection with the bombing. What they found was his correspondence with this Emory Burke guy, in which they discussed basically what is a good place to be bombed or something like that. They didn't say it outright, but it is heavily implied there that this is what they were, in a way, planning to do.
Right. They said something about how it would they probably said something like it would be good to bomb a synagogue. Not
I think they were a bit more clever than that. I think they even said like they didn't say bomb. They were planning to do something. They didn't say what. And I think one of them even said that maybe the synagogue is not a good place, something like that. But they were clearly discussing bombing a place. So this was like now a big shock for Rockwell's family, because not only was their son, outed as a Nazi, but he was outed like as a potential like probable terrorist Nazi in the national media, and it was like a big scandal, and they were like really, really not liking that at all. it was a huge shock. And what happened was that his father finally paid attention to his son because he was like hugely embarrassed, that now Doc Rockwell has a son, Rockwell, who is this crazy Nazi terrorist.
So people still knew who his dad was at this point. Like he was still
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure.
enough
Maybe
of a
not.
celebrity to be scandalized.
But he had a lot of friends in the show business. Many of them were Jewish, and I think this was a huge embarrassment for him.
Sure. Yeah.
And he even tried now to, like, on a couple of occasions, to persuade his son to stop being a Nazi. So he finally got his father to pay attention to him and to care, which I think was a big thing for him. I think it was kind of a self-destructive revenge from his part. So his brother Bobby, who was apparently completely different for Rockwell in every way, was completely alarmed and wrote to him and pleaded with him to stop doing these things. And he actually thought that his brother, like George Lincoln Rockwell, has a mental health problem, that he suffers from paranoia, and that he needs a psychiatrist, which he...
It's reasonable enough.
Yes, and he told him like that in 58, so very early on. He told him, like, you really need that. I will help you. I will pay for the psychiatrist. There's no shame in that. Our father had a psychiatrist all of his life. We'll help you. You just need to stop this self-destructive paranoid shit that you're doing, and everything will be fine. If you don't want to do it, I will have to cut my ties with you. And Rockwell didn't want to do it, and he made fun of his brother and everyone in his family for saying such things, and basically mocked them and their proposals. While all of this was going on, history was repeating itself, and that was that his marriage with Tora was falling apart. And there were also constant, arguments and fights and so on. And so by December 58, she took the kids and returned to Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, he started drinking heavily. This is now the time where, this is the formation of the American Nazi Party.
These are these moments. Him drinking heavily are like the most important moments in this.
Yes.
Him getting dumped, getting drunk, and becoming more of a Nazi.
He's like depressed to the point of being suicidal. He's drinking all the time. His family is renouncing him. They're saying him, you're crazy, you need to go to a psychiatrist. His wife and kids left him, and he's starting the American Nazi Party.
It's almost like becoming a Nazi isn't part of some natural order.
Yes.
That it seems like the entire natural order is working very hard to stop this from happening.
Yes. So what is he doing in all of his critical moments? And throughout his life, he's in contact with his mother and writes to her or visits her. And on this occasion, he visited her. It's always important for his mother to understand him. And he explained to her that he's like a man on a mission and had a mystical view of himself at this critical moment. And he always, at this moment, replayed what D. West Hooker told him, how it is the only way to, mobilize the American people is to become an open Nazi. And this is how he will become a national leader. This is now what he is in his mind, at least what he says years later.
All right.
So in this complete, total, situation of complete mental and physical decay, what he does is he starts by the end of 58, he starts displaying a huge Nazi banner in his home. Now,
that'll do it.
His empty home, everyone left him. He has a huge Nazi banner there, and he recruited the first 3 stormtroopers of the American Nazi Party, who are now there in his home instead of his kids and wife.
Was it now called the American Nazi Party, or that comes later?
At this point, I think it was, or it was in 59. I'm not sure, but it was basically that's when the American Nazi Party was started.
Okay.
The Wolfenstein was only when he was alone and tried to have a phantom Nazi organization.
Mm-hmm.
He again tried to recruit Buckley, who basically told him to fuck off. He wrote to him with some anti-Semitic stuff, and Buckley wrote to him that he's completely, disgusted by what he read and something like that. So throughout,
wait, he was cool with Buckley, or he thought Buckley was all right, but didn't like.
He thought that
the
Buckley.
John Birch
So he
Society.
thought that Buckley, like all of the leaders, basically agreed with him, but was too scared
Right.
to say it publicly. And he knew Buckley.
Not wrong.
It's true that he knew, and he
Yeah, I
knew a
guess
lot
he
of
gave
these
him a
people.
job at
So
one point.
I mean, I think he had some firsthand. It was not only delusional. He knew that many of them agreed with. I think in many things.
Yeah.
So and I think he liked Buckley. He was really kind of almost in love with Buckley, how smart he was, sophisticated, and things like that. And he really desperately wanted someone like that to support him. So he started the party, but he's drunk all the time. And during the 1959, he's desperately trying to reconcile with Tora in any way. He's writing to her, and he got an answer. She invited him to visit her in Iceland. And he was extremely happy and ecstatic and left for Iceland, hoping that they will continue their family life. And so he had no doubts about leaving the American Nazi Party in the hands of a guy called James K. Warner, who was the first national secretary of the American Nazi Party, and the guy who was basically responsible for the party. He had more sense for anything really than Rockwell did, and kind of ran the organization. And Warner was positive that that Rockwell was completely ready to not only quit the party but quit being a Nazi, just if Tora would have him back. But although he was in such a state, during the year they would get drunk together, Warner and Rockwell, like totally drunk, and then Rockwell would brag to Warner how he treated Tora like a dog and really kept her in her place, and then he would start weeping, and this is something that would repeat throughout the year. So at this time, he started his public career as a Nazi, and he started being drunk basically all the time. And so he would drink whiskey before he would give public speeches, and during the speeches he would drink glasses of iced vodka. And even you were a stormtrooper, you needed to how to prepare this iced vodka to him. What is the
I'm imagining his room as kind of like a Nazi Mr. Leahy from Trailer Park Boys.
Yes.
It's just giant bottles of liquor everywhere, and he said, "The liquor makes me see clearly."
Mr. Leahy, is this you talking or the liquor? Randy. I am the liquor.
Well, historically, liquor and his Nazism have gone together, so I guess he figured out the recipe.
But to his horror, when he went to Iceland, what Tora had proposed to him was a divorce. And and her family, who hated him, they arranged he stayed there in such a way that he had minimal contact with her. And that was it, basically. And he himself wrote to his mother that he offered to quit being a Nazi to Tora if she would only have him back, and she said no. And he went back home and was completely fucked up now, even more so than before, like really depressed and suicidal. And he wrote his mother that he's going to kill himself. And then the mother, Claire, was really alarmed, and then she decided to visit him. And at this point, she received another letter for him, and there was a change there. And he was now determined. And he decided that the fight against the Jews will sustain him. And then he would absorb all the pain that he feels and convert it into anger against his enemies. I mean, he said it himself like that.
That about sums it up, huh?
And on the last day of 1959, he wrote to his mother that she will be proud of him and that his enemies will pay.
Oh.
So...
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so his mom was going to visit him when he was suicidal, but now that he's become murderous, she's like,
he's fine. He's back. Link is back.
Oh, he just wants to commit genocide now. He doesn't want to kill himself.
Yeah, he's a good boy. He means well.
Liquor-crazed dummy.
So, Rockwell believes that race riots are coming in the 60s and the 70s, and he was right about that. One rare things that he was right about was that there will be race riots. But what he had more specific beliefs about that they will produce an economic chaos, specifically inflation, and that Americans will turn to a strong leader. So he wanted to gather a strong following, like a small one, but like a good caterer ready for street violence around him, and that he will be able to exploit the coming chaos and be elected as president in 1972. He was very specific about that.
Very specific.
Very,
Wow.
So this is like a very American idea, no? Like, and I mean, it's very. You can see, Charles Manson later, his plan was very similar to this. There will be race riots that would basically lead to some kind of an apocalypse, and then I will be the leader, just somehow by magic. Everyone will turn to me.
Yeah.
And
people
so
love
his
me.
plans as the president from the start were basically, this is his program from America: execution of all Marxist Zionist traitors. This means Jews. He also is very precise about saying that 80 to 95% of Jews are these traitors. So
so there are some.
There are some that aren't. But almost all of them are, and they need to be exterminated. And he's very open about this. He also says at point 2 that he will remove all disloyal Jews from the positions of influence, which is like, yes, if you kill all of the Jews, you will remove them.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. Yes. Yeah. And also the establishment of an international treason tribunal, which will publicly hang in front of U.S. Capitol all the non-Jews who were a part of the Jewish treason. So non-Jews will get an international treason tribunal and be hanged in front of U.S. Capitol.
This is a great platform. I'm sure he'll kill the elections.
Yes. And all African Americans will be moved to Africa. Those who don't want to do that, who refuse, would be moved to relocation centers, and had no rights there, and will be wards of the government. So basically, they will be slaves, but owned by the state.
Yeah. I mean, basically, what's already the prison system.
Yes. He only had it is estimated by different sources that he only had a few dozens of active members. He had some more, like people that he was in contact with, some sympathizers, maybe up to 500 people at its height is some estimate, but usually had less than 20 people around him. So most of the people who he attracted were described as misfits and kind of maladjusted of the society. For example, when they started the California chapter, the AMP Western Division, almost half of the stormtroopers there had felony arrest records or histories of institutionalization for mental illness.
They're perfect.
After he broke with the ANP, the James K. Warner, the former national secretary, he wrote that ANP at the time had 25 active members and 15 inactive members. But that Rockwell, when he did, so I don't know if I mentioned, but when he moved to DC, he later, when he started ANP, he moved to Arlington, so just across the river is where the headquarters were. And when he did public stunts there, he tried to attract all of the anti-Jewish people in the DC area to try and make ANP look bigger than it was. After his death, one former member of the Nazi Party, which at the time was called the National Socialist White People's Party, this is under Koehl, said that in 1970 the party had official party members like around 100. This is maybe too much, but this is like the highest number that's ever cited. That there were also like official supporters, people who were not members but would occasionally send some money, and that there was like 600 of them.
His mom.
And on their entire mailing list, they had 2,500 people, is what this guy said. But during Rockwell's time, this was smaller, I think. So during their first years, like 1960, 61, ANP received constant press coverage because of their violent clashes, mostly with Jewish organizations. And this fostered the impression that it was like a large or a growing movement. And this was deliberate on Rockwell's part. This was like his plan. the first phase of his plan to become a president in 1972 was this, and it kind of worked.
Okay.
At least in this first period, nothing else. So at the same time, well, it appeared that this is like a growing organization. Like one guy visited his home, not even the headquarters of the Nazi Party, but his home, and Rockwell's home, and he described it that all of the walls had like bullet holes in them.
Damn.
And there was like a stock of unpaid bills on the tables everywhere. And the electricity was turned off because he was not paying his bills. So he was lighting the house with kerosene lamps and like just shooting in his house inside.
Shooting, kerosene cans everywhere and fucking oily rags.
Liquor bottles,
yes,
and firearms. Yeah, what could go
So
wrong?
the American Jewish Committee, at some point, which like is a Jewish organization, that was like the enemy of the American Nazi Party, they obtained some the position from Rockwell because he had constant IRS problems, in which like on the question how is he financing himself, he answered that he's not financing himself, that he's basically starving.
Okay.
And so one of their agents of the American Jewish Committee infiltrated the headquarters of the American Nazi Party, and he was like completely shocked by what he saw there. There was like no running water. They had to pass water in from the outside. Upstairs were the trooper rooms. So these troopers basically lived in the headquarters because there were people who had nothing in their lives. Yeah. And so there were like 4 cots there, but many of them slept on the floor. The ones who slept on the cots didn't have any sheets. And this guy says everything looked and smelled unclean, and it was all very depressing, says this Jewish man who infiltrated the Nazi Party.
It's amazing that condition lasted all the way through James Mason's tenure.
I was about to say that, until like when he came in like the late 60s or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a decade of just filth.
Yes.
This is like, it's one thing to like, be filthy in like, I don't know. They're not living in like a punk house. They're like, oh, we want a highly structured, ordered society in which like, we are the master race, and they're just like, pissing and shitting in buckets and fucking getting completely wasted, falling down the stairs, like
passing out on the floor.
A complete fucking mess, like unwashed.
Yes, and so
drunk idiots.
And it was also like another thing that's important to paint this picture was that they were regularly having fights among each other, like physical fights and beating each other, and this was encouraged by Rockwell as like an Aryan way to settle disputes. So they would go into the yard and like,
where have we heard this before?
Like, fight, and sometimes they would get naked, and it was fake fights sometimes, like Burros that
we talked about that in the Patler. I'm sorry, the Burros
he was a specialist for these fake fights. Sometimes they were real, so they were like injured and stuff like that. So it's a complete, degeneracy. So at some points they had a bit more money, but never a lot. Like for example, in 1963, their annual budget was less than $20,000 as estimated by the American Jewish Committee. So this was basically the money they all lived on. Rockwell was consistently late with paying his alimony and had a lot of IRS problems. Never had money to pay taxes. They ate canned food. They would make French fries in some oil that's like it's described as basically being black all the time.
Yes.
At some points, they even had to eat cat food. His mother was constantly sending him money. So as late as 1963, like for example, when he wanted to go to the dentist, he had to ask his mom for money, like to give him $50. He didn't have to pay a dentist.
This is a grown-ass, fully grown Nazi man with what, like 5-6 kids?
Yes.
Good God.
Yes. So he was always appealing for money to his sympathizers in his publications. So he would write in some newspaper that they had things like this. This is Rockwell writing in all caps. Stormtroopers are eating stale bread and 10 cents a pound meat intended for dogs. They can't fight because they are hungry and cold.
Oh my God.
So 16 months before his death, he wrote to his Nazi buddy in Germany, Ludke, how his troopers are literally like starving. So this was a constant until he died. But at the same time, he rejected all, like Warner and some other people like Koehl later had more sense and thought that they, for example, they didn't have a treasurer. Like such a thing didn't exist. So he had no self-control, and he refused to have any kind of financial plan or stability or something like that. So he would spend money as he wished, eat the best food he could afford, and then these people would eat, cat food or dog food. So, for example, at some point, like a sympathizer came there, Rockwell was not there, and the sympathizer left $600. So the guy who was there, who was a bit responsible, was quick like to use the money to pay some bills before Rockwell comes and use all the money for booze or something like that,
Liquor, yeah.
So in 1966, IRS publicly auctioned their first headquarters in Arlington and sold the building and also all the contents in there because they were not paying taxes. He occasionally had these kind of financial angels who would give him some money, but it was never in some kind of continuous way. So we mentioned the first one was Aerosmith, who in 1958 gave him like $20,000 around that. In 1960, he had a new patron or new patrons. This was like Floyd Fleming from Arlington and his wife Emma, who were longtime racists. He had these weird couples, like middle-class couples, who had a bit of money and wanted to finance the American Nazi Party. They were not rich, but had some money. So these were the people who bought the house for them that was later auctioned by the IRS. I mean, someone buys a house to you and then you lose it like an idiot.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, these people, like you said, they're not rich, but luckily, they were stupid.
Yeah, for
very,
sure. Yeah.
Very stupid.
So, like throughout their support until Rockwell died, they gave somewhere in between $35,000 and $50,000 to Rockwell.
That's a lot of money for back then too.
So
it is.
There was another couple from Dallas this time called Robert Sari and I think Mary, his wife Mary. So they're interesting. They were also not rich, but they were kind of prosperous. They were co-owners of a printing company. But it's interesting because their partner in this business was a guy that we mentioned before, and this is the former U.S. Major General Edwin A. Walker was their partner.
Yes. Walker, Texas General.
So these were like the big supporters of ANP and friends of this Edwin Walker. So Mary was his personal secretary, and they tried to persuade Walker to be a Rockwell supporter, but he refused, and this got them very angry. So I think Mary quit being his secretary at that point. Rockwell would allude to our backers in Dallas, like saying probably trying to make people think there was like some rich oil people or something like that. But these were like probably these people and maybe 7 to 10 other middle-class Texan families who were occasionally giving not that much money, but some money. Robert Depew of Minutemen claimed that Rockwell got money from some rich guy called Clint Murchison Sr., who was a Dallas multimillionaire. And this was
his name is Murchison.
Yes, this was a kind a rumor, but it was never proved. Some people believe that he was, but I mean, I don't know how much money could he give him because
they clearly didn't have any money.
No, he was actually funded by Bob Marketman and Jim Banksky.
There was also like a rumor that he was received funds from like Arabic or Middle Eastern countries that were like anti-Israeli. He certainly tried to. He wrote letters to Nasser and to Egyptian embassy and actually tried to go there, but they like threw him out and publicly said they don't want anything to do with him. So I think probably that
he's basically the most poorly managed NGO in history. He like is sitting there writing to funders and they're just sleeping in their own.
Well, he probably had like a rider in his like list of things that he needed when he went to like, Egypt, and it would be like 25 bottles of liquor. And they're just like,
So
for my 2-day visit, I will need.
This was the miserable start of the American Nazi Party, and that concludes the second act of the episode.
Hooray!
All right. and the exciting third act yet to come, which I'm sure will
Will be a
just
triumph.
vindicate
Yes.
all the characters. Yes, they'll all make their way
Yes.
out. So we're going in now to Act 3, the final act of our two-part
Yes.
part of a 4-episode series. So this is Act 3
Well,
of episode 1 of 2
two-episode
out of
series.
a 4-episode run.
Well, 2 episodes
But-
really. There we have 2 main A&P episodes and then a few additional ones.
Potpourri.
But, yeah. The next part of this episode will be our next 3 episode next week. So yeah. Act 3 will be shorter than Act 1 and 2. I will talk briefly about some of their, let's call them political activities.
Sure. Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that next week.
I mean, at this point, Rockwell only has like 5 years to live or something, right? Like what year is Act 3 starting in?
It's not exactly completely chronological like that.
Okay.
So don't confuse me now.
Okay.
It's the 60s. So Rockwell's strategy for winning a mass following and political power rested really on provoking his enemies, meaning the Jews, through dissemination of completely fucked up Nazi literature and staging like flamboyant street rallies and demonstrations. So he thought that the Jewish power was practically unrestrained, and then they managed to subvert all of the most enlightened race leaders of the 20th century in America. And among these, he counted Henry Ford, Charles Lindbergh, Charles Coughlin, and Joseph McCarthy.
Well,
So
he would love this arc.
Yes. He would.
Those are our guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
those are
Joseph
his
McCarthy
heroes.
is the only one we haven't made a full episode on in that list. But yeah.
Mhm. He also
It's true.
thought that
Maybe we should one day.
everyone is an idiot, and that the masses are just dumb, but they need to win them over.
Yeah, dumb
And
people
he-
often think that.
Yeah, and he's saying like to prove that they're dumb, they're like these are the people who read comic books, so that somehow
Hey.
means they're dumb.
What the fuck?
Watch TV and read dime novels. So these people, in his opinion, they need to be entertained. So the A&P message must be sugar-coated and easy because these people don't study. They're not intellectuals like Rockwell and the stormtroopers.
The
so-
stormtroopers. Okay, I just
Yeah.
assumed he looked at his stormtroopers and thought, well, this is a cross section of America, so they must
Yeah.
all be like this. But no, he thinks the stormtroopers are like the intellectual leaders
They are
of tomorrow.
they are the elite.
Great.
So what he talked about in his public speeches is the need to end, any kind of socializing between the races, and the need to protect white homes and families, and especially white women from predatory blacks. So I guess this is the usual kind of neurosis about this.
Yeah.
So he would say things like, people hate N-words and are afraid of them. Basically, he thought that everyone already thinks like him in every way. And so everyone will be kind of relieved and glad that someone is saying in a very open and direct way.
He was just saying what we were all thinking.
Yeah. So in his public speeches, blacks were always like the irritants and Jews were the real enemy. And he wanted to display their flaws somehow. And by triggering them by displaying the swastika and dressing up as the brown shirt. That was the idea. And he thought that, by doing that, they will be compelled to show their true face, which I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what means.
Oh, they hate Nazis.
Yeah, they hate Nazis. Yeah, like when you have a lot of like Holocaust survivors and their children, when they see a Nazi brown shirt with a swastika, they get angry.
Oh,
and
it's
they want
just
to be-
anti-fascist prejudice.
Yeah, so I guess that somehow, I don't know. He thought that that's important. And I don't know.
Man, these Jews really hate Nazis.
Yeah. They finally show their real face.
Who knew? Yeah.
Yeah. So this strategy really consisted out of forming the this strong cadre like around him, the militant one, that would then publicly agitate by doing these outrageous, stunts, and will get media coverage to the party. This will mobilize the masses, and following the inevitable race riots, a race war would happen in the middle of a huge economic collapse and inflation around 1970, and this will result in Rockwell becoming the president in 1972. So he believed that his views were supported by the public officials and military leaders and police officers and the general public. And he based this on his personal experience. He always said that wherever they go, they are supported by the cops. And he was really kind of
certainly true.
Yeah. He was really obsessed by like this idea of having some kind of brotherly relations with the cops. He often wrote to them and said, come on, we really need, we have a common enemy and so on. And especially liked having good relations with the FBI. He believed that J. Edgar Hoover was basically a Nazi. And he would send all of his important information to the FBI. Like as soon as as they got new members, he would send the list of new members to the FBI. If someone left, he would notify the FBI that someone left the party and so on. So like, to call him a snitch would be like a total understatement. He, like, when it comes to FBI, he had no secrets. He voluntarily gave all of the information to.
He was like stalking the FBI.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like one of those guys that like pretends that they're a cop, or in this case, an FBI agent. It's like, I'm one of you. He has his own little badge.
Yeah,
he does though.
So the like the Atomwaffen, or like who are now renamed into the National Socialist Order, were outraged that one of their leaders, Joshua Sutter, was an FBI snitch for the last 15, 17 years, maybe longer than that. But they also claim to be in this line, the inheritors of the Rockwell politics.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know why are they outraged. I mean, the only difference was that Rockwell was doing it for free and Sutter was getting paid. I guess maybe that's the important difference.
Well, I think like Mason makes a break with some of Rockwell's tactics, right? I mean,
yeah, but
the legitimate path, right? The whole like trying to win people over is what he abandons in Siege, right?
That's true. But even Mason was like, you can be friends with cops and use them for your own purposes and that kind of thing. But
yeah, I mean, I guess he always said that like, there hasn't been another Rockwell, and that's why you have to abandon it. But when there's another Rockwell, then sure, go snitch to the cops. And maybe Sutter thought he was Rockwell.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
So in 1916, the DC and New York City public events that I already mentioned, he managed to, like, the goal was to aggravate the Jews so bad that they would be compelled to accord him publicly. So the public speeches at the Capitol Mall in Washington at the noon hour happened at the noon hour, where when the mall was crowded, from April to July, and a riot broke out. And this led to Rockwell's first arrest and to him being covered in the media on a national level. And an even bigger success for him was the event in New York City. That made him the most prominent anti-Semite in the country. So it happened on, they wanted to have an Independence Day rally in Union Square, but Jewish and veteran organizations opposed this idea. They wanted to ban it. So, but for example, ACLU supported ANP in this, and like on many other occasions, on the basis, of course, free speech advocacy and so on. So on the 22nd of June, a riot broke out in the rotunda of the state Supreme Court building in New York City. Rockwell was giving some inflammatory speech, and then he was attacked by 200 anti-Nazi demonstrators there.
Damn. Word.
So I guess they showed their true face,
Yes.
So he wrote to his mother when he got home, completely ecstatic about this huge success that the triumph that they had in DC and New York City. And he also excitedly wrote to his mother how the cops really supported them in both of these cities. And then, encouraged by this riot, he wrote this in their newspaper. the only cure for Jews is the old Dr. Adolf gas cure.
Oh.
And he promised that in exchange for a monthly pledge of $10, the ANP will exterminate the swarms of Jewish traitors in our gas chambers when they get when they take power in 1972. By the way, this is the guy who also says the Holocaust is a big lie that didn't happen.
Yeah. They like to reference the thing that didn't
something
happen
we've-
all
Yeah.
the time. Yeah.
And he also
Yeah.
thinks like someone else that we know that, it's very important to disprove this big lie that the Holocaust happened. And he used a lot of his time in like figuring out with his Nazi friends from other countries, like how will they do it. But he was
Yeah.
also saying things like this. So as a result of this stuff, in February of 1960, the Navy revoked his commission in the reserves. There was also a huge thing there, like he had to go and speak in front of a commission before they made this decision. This really hurt him because I guess he liked being a military person, and he was also getting some monthly payments from the Navy.
That's important.
But he nevertheless used this, for propaganda purposes. So he accused one of the members in the commission of being a Jewish traitor or something
Of
like
course.
this. So, of course, they unanimously voted to kick him out of the Navy. In the early 60s, he was spending a lot of time in constant fights with other right-wing leaders in the U.S. So, for example, one of the people that he had a fight with was Gerald L.K. Smith, who previously he was very influenced by. Also, his former friends from the National States Rights Party, Edward Fields. Rockwell actually sued this guy because Fields wrote that Rockwell made a deal with some very famous columnist to share right-wing secrets with him in exchange for publicity.
Oh.
And this was probably true, but this Fields guy didn't have proof for that, so he lost the court case.
Sorry, do you know if this is before the hate bus thing where
I
they
think it
got
was
into that other
before.
falling out? Because then
I think it was
they
before,
fell
but
out
I'm not-
twice.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure exactly.
Uh-huh. So he's really not getting along in the South then either, because I mean Gerald L.K. Smith was keeping a lot of the Klan together through his networks
Yeah,
and stuff.
yes.
Like,
I mean,
he's
no one
losing a
really
lot of-
likes this guy.
Yeah.
So his main guy, Warren, that I mentioned, left the party in 1962. He was the chief administrator. So when he left, Rockwell took over, and this was complete chaos until Koehl took over a few years later.
Okay.
When he left, he published a book against ANP and accused Rockwell of being like a lazy and greedy and a coward. So he kind of explained how their daily life looked, and he said that Rockwell slept throughout most of the day and avoided any kind of physical work, and took always the best food, left total shit for the stormtroopers to eat, and constantly manipulated and lied to people. He consistently tried to bring them into some kind of a danger, but avoided fights himself. For example, when the thing in DC happened, Rockwell hid behind a speaker's platform. So they were constantly thinking of some, like, what kind the stunts that they will do. So one thing that they did was like they picketed the movie Exodus, which was some feature film about Israel.
Right.
So they would do that in front of movie theaters, just harass people who were trying to go to watch a film. Then they had this brilliant idea of having their own hate bus, which was a way for them to mock the Freedom Riders who were struggling to integrate the public transport system. Then they enlisted racist folk singers, and then even published a record of this Nazi, horrible Nazi folk music.
Oh, that sounds like
yeah,
an
I mean, this
episode.
shit's. Yeah.
Probably not, because I thought maybe that we can do it, but I think there's basically one or two songs or something like that, and I think that
It's really bad
Yeah.
too. I mean, it is literally just them yelling the N-word.
yeah,
It's
The
Okay, so we
musician
can
is
spare
actually-
ourselves and our listeners that.
yeah.
nonsense. I guess.
This Nazi folk musician is actually a father of one of the stormtroopers. So by this time, no one in his family except his mother wanted anything to do with him, and he was kind of enraged by this. So he wrote to them, kind of sent an angry letter to his family, and he stated how he commands a global movement. We'll talk in the next episode about this global movement.
Okay.
And that this is proof that he's neither a failure or insane. And then, like, maybe this reminds you of someone that we know. He taunted them to try to disprove these facts.
Right. Yeah. Show me the probative evidence.
Yes.
Yeah. That does sound a bit familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. And his idea was that he will win his family back once, after his triumph. They will just have to ask.
So once he becomes Führer, they'll be, pleased and
yes,
I see.
proud of him.
Yeah.
That's the big plan.
Or he'll execute them. Either way, it's a win.
So what is interesting here is that on more than one occasion, he and also the stormtroopers attended Nation of Islam events.
Yeah.
This happened
Right.
like maybe 3 times, and on one occasion, the Nation of Islam actually asked him to give a speech there. And this is when he said something how Elijah Muhammad is Black Hitler or something like that.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah, I think this was like really, I don't know how they managed to do this, because the whole time they're saying how black people are so inferior and incapable of doing anything really, and the Nation of Islam was so obviously a superior group to
They were in awe of
I was about to say that they must have been completely in awe and jealous of it, because they had exactly what they wanted, right? Like mass support, highly disciplined and organized.
So they would go to this event and there would be like 8,000, 9,000 people there. The Fruits of Islam people were like very kind of impressive and disciplined, while people were, giving these speeches. They were like almost completely, standing on the stage without almost any movement for hours. So like total discipline and commitment. And then the stormtroopers were, we talked about them, how they were.
Yes.
I mean, Rockwell what was he like drinking while he was up there? Did he have his like glass of vodka?
I don't know.
And
I don't know. Maybe that was the only sober speech that he gave.
Yeah. My guess is that he was probably too nervous and self-conscious to do that there.
Yeah. Rockwell was especially impressed by Malcolm X, and even when Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam, he kind of thought that Malcolm was right, and he supported, I guess, his side somehow.
His post Nation of Islam side?
Yes, well, this was immediately after he left. He thought that he was saying things about Malcolm X, that he's superior to most white people, actually. That he's really he was really impressed by him.
I mean, it's not hard to be impressed by Malcolm X if you listen.
For real. Yeah.
To his speeches. It's an incredible speaker.
Yes. I mean, he also kind of made fun of Rockwell on this occasion, because Rockwell made a donation at the event of $20, and then he stood up and got big applause from everyone there. There were 8,000 people, and Malcolm X said, "That's the biggest applause, the biggest hand you ever get," something like that.
Right.
And, and Rockwell was kind of really embarrassed. So, I mean, Nation of Islam, what a crazy group! What an idea to have any kind of, any kind of contact and agreement with fucking Rockwell,
Yes.
to invite him to give a speech. So Elijah Muhammad was really...
Elijah Muhammad was pretty interesting and kind of totally nuts figure. I mean, we'll definitely at some point have to talk about that as well. In 1963, Rockwell and the Nazi Party, they tried to organize a counter demo to Martin Luther King's March on Washington. And this was a complete embarrassing failure. So he wanted to establish himself as kind of MLK's rival, I guess. And he had this hugely unrealistic idea of how many people he will attract there to confront, March on Washington. And then when he kind of saw that it was not going well, he actually tried to prevent MLK from getting a permit
to do the thing. So he wrote embarrassing like letters to the cops, trying to get them to go to his side against black people, communists, and so on. They need to ban this thing. He also wrote to segregationist congressmen, trying to, I guess, also influence them to ban MLK's March on Washington, and also wrote to segregationist governors like George Wallace and Ross Barrett to try to get them to speak at his event. And he was ignored by them. So in the end, he managed to gather less than 90 people at his event in August, on the 29th of August, and which was less than 1/10 of 1% of what he predicted, his estimation. So I mean that's
like his
kind
whole
of proof,
life.
That's proof that you're a failure, I guess. No. I mean,
Yes.
That's it. So it's interesting that although he was saying how he has nothing against black people, he just thinks they are inferior and like manipulated by Jews and wants to resettle them in Africa. Privately, in his letters, he would also confide to his friends that he also wants to exterminate all black people.
Okay.
But how he's not saying that publicly because he doesn't want to agitate them prematurely.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get his fucking
Yeah,
ass
because he
kicked.
doesn't. Exactly. Yeah. They have
By a highly
a well-organized
Yes.
movement. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he was saying like really sick things like Jew brains directing N-word bodies, and his like obsession with this connection between Jews and black people is also kind of really closely connected to his attitudes towards sex, and especially his obsession with interracial sex. So there's
I was wondering. It was just a
quote
matter of
here.
time. Like,
Here's a quote here. More and more, let me check. More and more, I'm seeing the results of the combination of a Jew brain injected into the gorilla-like body of the African. From the loins of Jewish girls under blankets with savage African Negroes are crawling a generation of these gorilla bodies implanted with Jewish brains. Nothing from outer space or the Black Lagoon could be more terrible.
oh my god, he's talking about Krang from Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
but like some racist version of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a sane person completely. And
Holy shit.
So on two occasions, he directly kind of instigated physical assaults on Martin Luther King. Both of these things happened in Alabama. The first one was in '62 when MLK was giving a speech, and then a stormtrooper went to the stage and struck him 4 times to the head, I think. This guy was called Roy James, and then Rockwell awarded him the Order of Adolf Hitler Civil Medal, which is the highest honor the party had for the heroic deed, he said, that he did. And
Would they make them from like fucking beer caps or something?
I don't know. And in '65, another member of the AMP punched MLK again. This was, I think, in the lobby of the hotel where he was staying, also in Alabama. But above all, he the biggest hate that he publicly was sharing was directed towards gay people. So he would often say that this is the group of people that they're his biggest enemy, and he wants to gas them even before the Jews. So
I would love to hear his very complicated take on what is and isn't gay.
this is very interesting, because he would say publicly things like, well, there is a tendency for queers to come here, like meaning the party. And then he got a little bit confused, and he would say like, it's like it's tempting for them, like a girls' school is tempting for me. Okay. So, or he would say, like he did it like in a television interview. He said something like, "Yes, there is a tendency for queers to come here." Like, and there are we have many members who used to be homosexuals, but we help them, and they're not homosexuals anymore.
The shirtless backyard wrestling matches.
If he's talking about many members here, and the group has like
what, 20 at any given
20?
time? Yeah.
That's probably a good portion of it.
So John Petler, when he was asked about gay people in the group, he said to the reporter, "Well, like he was asked, well, like, what would they do to them?" And he said, like, "Well, maybe we'll get the stormtroopers to use them."
Oh,
That was his answer, which is like, okay. So like,
Oh.
what will you do with gay people? We'll fuck them. Is the answer?
man.
So yeah, really confused there.
This is definitely, I mean, like, really, again, a great dissertation topic. If anybody out there wants to take
Yes.
that on, sexuality of the ANP.
Yes, there were also constant rumors about individual members of being gay. Some were actually outed as being gay. And there was rumors about Matt Koehl and also about Rockwell himself. So there is an interesting thing here. Before he was like sent to jail one time, he sent a letter to his mother in the eve of his incarceration in Chicago. And so he wrote to his mother, "The bad part, of course, is the possibility of being thrown in that wild jail while all of the colored brothers eagerly awaiting to make love with me."
That's a very specific fantasy.
Yes.
You know what it reminds me of? It's when we played that fucking game,
I was about to
right?
say that the fucking
Yeah.
The
video,
video game, yeah, from Resistance Records. There's that whole fucking level where you go to jail and you start breathing super heavily and have to like beat back a bunch of apparently gay people
Yes.
who are prisoners with you.
Yes.
Man,
That's that. You mentioned already in the episode, Fritz, that you did on Burros. You mentioned Dr. Feinberg, who was the head of the American Jewish Committee.
yeah,
This guy was kind of a veteran of these anti-Nazi struggles in America, and in the 1940s, he was an advocate of this quarantine strategy when they were confronting Gerald L.K. Smith, and it kind of worked there. So he wanted to do the same thing now with the American Nazi Party and Rockwell. That basically means that they should kind of ignore them as much as possible, because he figured out that, you know, the reaction that he has, like one thing that Rockwell was right about is that he will provoke a reaction, and this will give the media attention. And every time that happened, like a bunch of racists from all over the country would send them money, like and it, you know, it created this idea that they are somehow a big organization that's growing. So Dr. Feinberg really kind of tried to push this idea amongst Jewish organizations, and finally they agreed with him that the Jewish group should not be provoked and should try to ignore him as much as possible and not give him any media attention. The Jewish war veteran group was kind of agreed with that, but they were like the hardest to
right, yeah.
They really wanted to
fucking
beat him up.
Yes.
But eventually they did that, and he was really, like, Rockwell really hated that. He complained how this is censorship, and there was like, I'm surprised, like there's a lot of, I mean, I'm not surprised, I guess, but America is that in that way kind of a strange and exotic country for me. A lot of like liberals were also kind of criticizing this, like that this is also a form of censorship, which I don't get. How is this censorship? Just ignoring some horrible, like really essentially not important, horrible person who's advocating genocide.
Yes.
And has like 20 followers, but I don't know. And then when this happened, he kind of found another gig for himself, and this was giving lectures at universities, which is also a very strange thing.
Yes.
So he would like really tour the country giving these lectures, I guess, and he would get paid like hundreds of dollars per speech.
That's amazing. I mean, really, listeners should probably multiply everything that he gets by about like 9 as far as buying power goes. So
Yes.
he's like really pulling it in, doing that for him.
Yes.
For him anyway, you know.
That was like a complete revelation for him when he discovered that he can do that. And all of these student groups were like defending them inviting him to speak there, like also with this like freedom of speech thing, like saying like, you know, not to do that would be like censorship basically, which I don't like. How is that censorship? Like not inviting some completely psychotic person who's talking about how he wants to exterminate all of the Jews and has like 30 members is censorship. I don't know. Very strange.
Shadow banning.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for this episode, more or less, I think.
Oh, we're gonna leave him there in the university. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So and we'll continue next week to talk more about what they did, also on the international level. And they had also some factional differences between themselves. There were some actual politics there almost. Different opinions.
I like factional differences.
And connections with the Christian identity and
okay.
also his death. That will be the topic for the next episode.
All right, lot to look forward to there, especially the last part.
Yeah.
I'm already sick of this fucking guy.
Yeah.
He's lived long enough. Well, I guess, we can thank him for not being one of those dudes that lived on to be like 89 and stuff and like died in the 2000 shit. I mean, he at least had the decency to, bow out.
Well, if you want to thank someone, I
yeah.
think that's probably a member of the American Nazi Party who's responsible.
Which member?
Which member? It depends who you believe.
About it.
Yeah.
Talk about it next week.
Yes.
Yeah, that is the big question, huh?
Yes.
All right. Well, this brings a lot of this arc together in a very sad story, as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking forward to hearing the last gasps of this really absurd, really sad group.
Depressing. I
Very
mean,
depressing,
even the Jewish person who infiltrated them was kind of depressed. Like, I would expect him to be happy that they're so in such
They're
a horrible
like shit-faced
condition.
and eating dog food.
But
These
he was
people are
also
much
kind of-
better people than we are.
He was also kind of depressed by what he saw.
Yeah.
I guess yeah.
Yeah. Aw. All right. Well.
All right, well, yeah, let's pick up on that next week then.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go have some cornflakes and water and think
And
about
we'll talk
what I've
about
learned.
them also in the premium episode as well.
That's
We'll talk
right.
about-
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. See y'all later.
Bye.
Cheers.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.